So we hit 500 subscribers. Thank you all so much. I mean, anyone that's followed me over from either seeing my program in person and loving what I do and wanting to watch videos of this ugly mug talking more about animals. For anyone that's followed me over from Reddit or Facebook groups or other YouTube videos, thank you so much. Back when I started this channel in like January, I had no idea how quickly it was going to grow. I love doing education. I love educating people about these cool animals, and this is just another way to do it. So I wasn't really worried about growing subscriber count, anything like that. It was just kind of like, when we hit it, we hit it. So today we hit 500 subs. So as promised, we're going to be doing a mini reptile room tour. Now I'm not going to be showing you all 60 plus species that I keep. We're not going to talk about like the exotic mammals, like the chinchillas and things. We're not going to talk about all the amphibians, all the reptiles, the bird, things like that. We're going to show you probably a dozen or so different species today, a good number of my animals, and we're going to talk about why I have them. We're going to talk about what I use them for, whether they're for education ambassadors, whether they're just kind of personal pets for me, because some of my animals don't really go to programs. They're kind of just more pets for me. They either get stressed out or scared, or they're not a big fan of travel, whatever. So you're going to see some animals that don't really go to my programs. So without further ado, for the first time ever, I think ever, yeah, outside of people that like come over and volunteer and help me out with my animals, we're going to be showing you the public what's inside my reptile room. So without further ado, let's start the tour. So we're going to start today off going over what is probably the most popular animal that I have. He's definitely the star of all of my shows. This is Norman, my Argentine black and white tegu. Now, you've seen this whole thing done before. We did a video all about building my first ever animal plastics enclosure and the ramp and everything else that we did in it. He's really liking it. The plants are doing really well. Now, the one plant right here, it kind of died off a little bit when I replanted it, but it's coming back really well. I've actually had that plant for like 4 years now, and it's kind of died off and come back every time I moved it. It was originally a dying house plant my mom gave me from her work, and it's just kind of been in Norman's enclosure ever since. Can you come out and say hi to people? So besides the plant, the other main difference is the strip UV light. I put this UV light in shortly after I moved him in, but I didn't have it for the video. Now, I've had Norman for going on just over 6 years. I got him in the beginning of August 6 years ago. So he's been with me long since before I started Uncharted Wild. I got him from a guy, I think around White Plains, New York, just north of the Bronx. And he just had him in a fish tank. He actually thought Norman was a girl because it was 2 years old and he still wasn't that big, but he just wasn't feeding him right. He had it in a 55-gallon fish tank. When you have a 2-year-old tegu, please do not keep it in a 55-gallon fish tank. And he's been doing really great for me ever since. He's super friendly. He's kind of what a lot of people picture when you picture a tegu, is easygoing, chubby, loves food, things like that. He's never really given me any problems whatsoever. He's fine outside on just walking around on his own. He has been pet by hundreds of thousands of kids, probably. Maybe not hundreds of thousands, but he's been pet by thousands of kids. He is a super popular animal because he's just so big. He's so cool looking. He's like a chubby, kind of miniaturized Komodo dragon a little bit. So tegus are super popular education animals. And he's really been digging this PVC enclosure. It holds humidity much better than the wooden one that he used to live in that I built myself. We're going to show that later when I go over Charlie, because now Charlie lives in it. But we got a whole bunch of upgrades coming. I've got 2 PVC enclosures arriving in December. I've got 2 more coming next summer. So stay tuned, because there's going to be a lot more PVC enclosures and just kind of nice, more professional looking enclosures on the way. So that's Norman. He doesn't move around a whole lot. He's not the most interesting to watch. So we're going to move just up above him, and we're going to talk about one of my smallest lizards. And above him we have Dustin, my leopard gecko, and you've seen Dustin before in quite a few videos. Our leopard gecko spotlight video, a couple other ones, best beginner pet reptiles, because they do make much beginner pet reptiles than like tegus and monitors do. And you've seen this whole enclosure before in our leopard gecko care video we did a couple months ago. Now, leopard geckos do not need the space that a tegu does, so while Norman has a 4x8 by 4 foot enclosure, Dustin here is just in a 20-gallon long. I've had him for just about a year now. I got him, I think, last October, and he was just a pet people didn't want anymore, so he came to hang out with me. And I mean, he's just your typical leopard gecko. He's super friendly. He's very easy to handle. He was kind of squiggly when I first got him, but he's much better now. And these guys, they don't need UV light, so I don't have to worry about that. Now, there are plenty of people that keep their leopard geckos on UV, and that's completely fine. I don't. He's just got a regular heat incandescent bulb. And then he also gets kind of the general belly heat that comes from this enclosure being in the 80s and 90s, kind of coming up through this. So he's got a good bit of heat and insulation going in here. And then also, if you notice, I do keep him, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of hate for it in the comments, but I do keep him on loose substrate. I know I'm a terrible leopard gecko owner. Now, if you remember from the leopard gecko care video, if any of you's watched that, then I do keep him on loose substrate, but it's not 100% sand, because that's bad. It's a sand soil kind of eco-earth mix, and you mix it all together, and it does a really good job at holding burrows. It's a very good base for a bioactive substrate. Now, this guy is not on a bioactive substrate. It's kind of like a semi-bioactive. There are a couple like little mealworm things in here and stuff like that. Where did he go? Oh, he's in his little cave. Oh no, he's right here. You didn't think you could lose a little gecko in a little 20-gallon tank, but it happens. Okay, I know. He's not really used to being awake right now. But anyway, so I do keep him on this mix. Now, where these guys are from in the wild, if you remember from the leopard gecko spotlight video, leopard geckos do not live in a giant desert, so he's not just on loose substrate. They live with a bunch of rocky outcroppings and things and hidey holes and things, so I give him a couple different hides. He's got a bunch of different rocks in here of different textures, of different kind of surfaces and heights and everything that'll just kind of help wear down his nails. And that way it's not just straight loose substrate. He has a bunch of different things to climb on and climb under and everything. I try to make it as natural as possible. Now, one thing you'll notice with a lot of my enclosures is I try to make a lot of them naturalistic. So I do try to put loose substrate if I can. I do try and put some like bioactive cleanup crew if I can, but a lot of them don't have live plants, mainly because a lot of my animals are pretty destructive on plants. I've tried. So like some of the monitor lizard and things like that, live plants don't work. But I also need to be able to get these animals out. It's not like most reptile YouTubers where they can make these amazing, gorgeous vivariums and they have all of these pothos vines and plants and bushes and all this other stuff for the animals to hide in, and you could go a month without ever seeing your animal. These animals, for the most part, go to education programs with me. So when it's time for me to get them out to go to a program, I don't really have the time for half an hour to dig through a little jungle trying to find the crested gecko or something like that. So when I can, I do try to put live plants in. I do try to make it as kind of naturalistic and close to bioactive as I can. But again, since I'm not just a full-time reptile YouTuber and these animals do have to go places with me, I can't really make a super elaborate jungle setup or anything like that. And that's kind of one thing that's kind of postponed me from wanting to do a reptile room tour, because I know people might look at this and be like, oh, it's a crappy enclosure. Some of my animals are on newspaper, like some of the snakes and the lizards and things, and a lot of people will be like, oh, that's not really nice to look at. So I don't know. It's just people always love critiquing how you keep your animals. I've been working with reptiles for 10 years now, and I try to do a mix of things. I try to do what works best for that animal and for me. So yeah, so that's Dustin. So we started off with my biggest lizard and basically my smallest lizard. So why don't we move on to something a little bit different? Right across from them, we're going to talk about a different kind of reptile. So across from them, we have one of my only aquatic animals. This is Gilligan. He's an African side-neck turtle. And I've had him for about 2.5 years now, and I got him, he was kind of a weird case. I got a call from a guy saying he had to leave the country, like, immediately, which, I don't know, I didn't ask questions, but I went over and picked up this turtle, and he's been with me ever since. He's a really, really friendly turtle. That's why I love side-neck turtles. Side-neck turtles are far and away the best beginner pet turtle out there for people. They do not get to the size and the aggression of red-eared sliders, and too many people get red-eared sliders from pet stores, and I really wish they didn't, because side-neck turtles are freaking awesome. Like I said with Dustin, some of my animals are in kind of bare-bone setup, and this is one of them. He does not have a substrate. I don't have any pebbles or sand or anything at the bottom of this. It's just a bare tank bottom. He has a little ramp to get up out of the water and bask. This is a ZoomEd power sun bulb to give him UV and heat in one go. He's got this like kind of fish decor log thing right here, and he'll hang out sometimes on top of that. Sometimes he'll actually go into it and he'll poke his little head out from right here in between the hole right here. And I turned the filter off right now, obviously, so you could hear me. And aquatic turtles, anyone that keeps aquatic turtles, you know, they make a huge mess. So I just did this so it's easy for me to get in, scrub the tank, clean the tank. So his enclosure looks dirty for a couple different reasons. One, he's got all this kind of stuff built up around here. That's just hard water stain. That's just calcification. That's not like dirt or anything like that. And honestly, because these animals are for me, and no one comes over to really look at the turtles. Like I said, this is really the first time I'm letting people look in. I did clean it a little bit, but it's not something I'm really worried about. It doesn't deter from his life. It doesn't do anything. It just makes it look a little dirtier. But the water, I promise, is 100% clean. I just changed it a couple days ago. Now, on top of that, also, I have these bright green walls, so it makes the water have this kind of yellowish tint. So I promise the tank probably doesn't look that appealing from the eye, but again, I'm an educator, so sometimes it's not about making the enclosure look good. I try to as best I can. I give him what he needs, but sometimes it's just about making it so when you have a really messy animal, you can clean it. And then right here I have this insulation and cardboard right here because he was able to get out and get around. And it curls back a little bit from the water, but it actually helps because that way he can't try and get out. He's just an all-around awesome turtle, and I love side-neck turtles because with their beak, it looks like they're always smiling. Now, these are a cool turtle because he can't pull his head straight back in. He actually tucks his head off to the side, but we'll talk about that in a different video. So yeah, so that's Gilligan. That's one of my 2 turtles. I have him and I have a snapping turtle. We're not going to look at the snapping turtle today. But yeah, so now we're going to go on to the other side of Norman's enclosure, and we're going to talk about Simon. Now, right on the other side of Norman, they're literally back to back, we have Simon, my ornate monitor lizard. He's a pretty big fella, but he's still growing, whereas most of my other big lizards are kind of close to or adult size like Norman. Now, he's a very kind of skittish and camera shy fellow, so we're not going to see him today, but I have plenty of B-roll of him. And we actually did an entire video on this enclosure build, just like we did with Norman's, where we talk about kind of the differences between Norman and his enclosure. Like, Norman has live plants and everything like that. Simon digs them up and kills them. I tried to, and he killed them pretty quick. He dug them and destroyed them. So this guy, he's just got rocks in there. He's got some logs. He's got a pretty big water area. He's got a flipped over kind of litter pan that is his kind of cave, and he digs up underneath the logs and everything like that. So he's got a whole bunch of hidey holes that either I made or he made for himself. He's got this elevated basking platform. He's got 2 UV lights. We've got a strip UV light just like with Norman, and also like with Norman, we've got 2 dual heat lamps up here, and one of them is a mega ray, 160 watt. It's a mercury vapor bulb, so it combines heat and UV. Ever since I moved him in here, he's been more iffy with me because he didn't like me having to kind of force grab him from his quarantine enclosure and moving him into this. But I've had him for about a year now, and he's a very interesting lizard to work with. I love working with monitor lizards regardless, whether it's an Ackie monitor, Savannah, Niles. I like working with laces and all this other. I like working with monitor lizards because of the intelligence and everything, and also they're just much more active. My tegus are very lazy compared to my monitor lizards. So even though he's hiding right now, he is out here and he makes a whole bunch of destruction and commotion. He moves around dirt. He's a very strong lizard. So this is his enclosure, and this is number 2 of our animal plastics enclosures. And remember, I got 4 more coming in the next year. We're doing a lot of upgrades from the enclosures like here that I built myself. We're going to take a look at this next with some of the animals that live over here. So it holds humidity better, it holds heat better, very easy to do, and it costs about the same as building it myself. One of these days I'll do a video comparing the enclosures that I built versus the enclosures that I bought through Animal Plastics, but I'm very happy with this enclosure, and both my lizards that are in them really seem to like them. We're going to go over here now, and I'm going to show you some animal enclosures that I have not yet shown on the channel. So right here we have one of my tortoise species. We have, if I can dig them out, one's in the corner over here, my pancake tortoises. Now, these were in my very first YouTube video back in January when we talked about some of my strangest animals, because pancake tortoises are some super weird animals, and my hair was much shorter back then. I have not gotten a haircut since almost last October, so it's been going on a year. Anyway, so pancake tortoises are very, very cool. Now, these guys, I'm actually pretty proud of this enclosure, not going to lie, except I'm going to have to tear it down. But anyways, these guys have a really cool enclosure. They have these kind of double stacked rock slate tile things right here. They're slate, and then also from the flooring section of like a hardware store. And then these are flat rocks from the garden section of, again, hardware stores. And they use these because in the wild, that's what these guys do. They're going to hide in little rocky outcroppings and crevices, wedge themselves in, and then they can inflate themselves because their shell is actually semi-flexible. And that way predators can't kind of get them out of there. Now, as I said, this enclosure is coming down because I'm going to actually deconstruct these enclosures, and I'm going to reassemble the bottom one, because this is actually a double-decker. I'm going to reassemble the bottom one out there, and one of the new nice PVC enclosures, the 8 foot by 4 foot, is actually going to take the place of this one, and it's going on top. And these guys are unfortunately not getting that entire space to themselves. They're going into a quarantine set up, and then I'm going to build them something new probably in December or so when those enclosures come. So these guys are living in this. They've lived in this for a while now, and got all 3 of them from a guy that was moving, couldn't take them with him. He's had them for the 16 years of their life, and these guys have some really unfortunate pyramiding because they were never really properly taken care of. They were basically in a 3 foot by 1 foot enclosure, something like that, and they didn't have any nice tight wedge places to kind of naturally wear their shell down. They weren't given the proper diet. They weren't given the proper calcium, so they just developed. Some of them, the worst is honestly Blueberry. The female, she has the worst pyramiding of any of them. I don't know how well the camera's going to pick that up, but she's got some pretty bad pyramiding. Now I've got them on a sandy soil substrate mix like I keep a lot of my animals on, as you're going to see as a recurring theme. But these guys, it airs more on the sandy side. Now before I had these guys in here, Roxy, my Cuban rock iguana, actually lived in here. Because basically, once I got those new PVC enclosures, it started a Congo line. So Norman used to be in an enclosure I'm going to show you in a little bit. So he was in that enclosure, he moved there. Charlie used to be in the one down here. He moved over to what Norman was in. Roxy used to be up here. She moved down here. And then the Pancakes, I got to move in here. They're a very kind of shy, secretive animal, and they don't really like being out in the open too much. And they do normally have a UV light. This is it right here. This is their normal UV tube light. But like I said, literally probably tomorrow, once I'm done filming this video, I'm going to start breaking this down and moving them out. And I'm moving all this to begin with because I have to put a new big enclosure right here for another new animal that's going to be coming. So again, we got a couple new exciting animals on the way. They're a few months out, but still, I think it's going to be really cool having them. So anyways, I'm not talking about that yet. So anyways, Pancake Tortoises. Originally, this was made, believe it or not, this was originally made for my boa constrictor, Maya, but I realized that this was not going to work because, again, like I said, I need to be able to reach my animals, and in that back corner over there's no way I could get a muscular 8-foot snake out of that back corner, so it was not going to happen. So I put Roxy in here instead, and unfortunately, next to this one, I had Jade, my green tree python, and when I built this, I didn't seal the bottom well enough, especially for the high humidity that green tree python needs. The bottom just started rotting out, and then that bottom rotting out actually spread, because they share a bottom, spread over into this one. So this one I had to put a panel down because it's a dry setup, so it's for an iguana and then Pancake Tortoises, and they're not digging down to it. This was the 3rd enclosure that I'd ever built. So we built the one Charlie's in now, which is behind the camera. We built that one first. That was 5.5 years ago, something like that. That's an older enclosure. Then we built this one. Originally I had Thor, my Savannah monitor, and then Thor passed away, and then Charlie went into it. And then we built this, like I said, this was originally supposed to be for our boreal snake. So I had Jade here, my water python on the other side, and this was supposed to be for the boa constrictor, but that just didn't really pan out. So we're going to be junking this. I built this thing like a rock. So this one on the bottom can handle all the weight that this one has on the top. These things are built like tanks, and we have these metal fasteners here to keep them in place so nothing shifts around, and it's all on wheels. We put caster wheels on the bottom just like we did with the PVC enclosure, so I can move this around if I want to. They're not easy to move because they're very heavy. And right here we have one of my pride and joys. We have Roxy, my Cuban rock iguana. She is hands down probably the reptile that is most attached to me. A lot of people think reptiles are just kind of dumb, uncaring animals, but they're not. Now, it kind of varies. It's mostly a lot of your big lizards bond the kind of best with people, I guess if you want to use the term bond, but they socialize depending on the species. Now, my green iguana is very indifferent to me. Norman's just kind of okay with everyone. He doesn't really care. Charlie can be a little bit of a brat. We talked about Simon. Roxy just loves me. Normally when I walk down here and I walk by her window, she thuds against the glass, kind of like, let me out, and she'll usually just climb right up onto my shoulder. Here, you want to come out and say hi? Oh, you're okay. And she is hands down one of, you try not to pick favorites, but she is definitely one of my favorite animals that I have. Because rock iguanas have always been at like the top of my reptile wish list. Back when I was kind of coming up with Uncharted Wild and what animals I wanted to use back in college, Cuban rock iguana was up there because they are just such cool lizards. They are so friendly. I say she loves me, but now she wants nothing to do with me. I think the light is freaking her out. I got Roxy and Charlie from the same exact person. My Tegu, my red Tegu, and rock iguana from the same exact person. They were about an hour away from me, and he was joining the military. He was joining the Marines, and he had a whole bunch of lizards that he had to rehome, so I took these two. Rock iguanas are just so cool. They're so friendly. They don't like the verticality as much as the green iguana. She does climb a good bit, but it's nothing like what the green iguanas do. They also are a different body. They have a stockier tail, different coloration and everything like that. They also like it a lot drier, whereas your green iguanas like it really humid. Rock iguanas are kind of more moderate to semi-arid species. They don't need it as humid, but they do like kind of humidity burrows. So I do dump some water in the substrate every once in a while, especially around her cave. And I give her that cave, and she sleeps in it sometimes, but most of the time, she just falls asleep sleeping on that log in there. A lot of your big lizards, when you're talking about reptile care, a lot of people say give them 2 hides, but most of my big lizards, they only have 1 hide. Because it's kind of difficult to do a hide on the hot side when you're doing a basking spot for a big lizard, at least in a 4x8 enclosure. Like Simon, they have the elevated basking platforms, and Norman will sleep under his sometimes, but most of the time I give them the 1 hide, and they'll sometimes use it, but a lot of times they just kind of sleep wherever. They sleep on the logs or whatever because they're just very comfortable in their environment. So Roxy is just an awesome lizard. That's Roxy. Now we're going to kind of loop around the corner right here and talk about 2 of my smaller lizards. So next to Roxy, I have Merlin, one of my 3 bearded dragons. I have Merlin, Gandalf, and Blackbeard. They're all named after fictional bearded characters. My other 2 bearded dragons, they're on a natural substrate, sand, soil mix, things like that, like a lot of my lizards. But unfortunately, Merlin here is he's in what I would call a sterile, kind of bare bones quarantine-ish setup. He's just on newspaper. Now, Merlin, when I got Merlin in, he was really tiny, and the previous owner didn't give him the right lighting, so he didn't get that UV light that he needs. So his bones developed kind of weird, and he was so small, and it happened so quickly, so his back legs didn't really grow properly. So his back legs he can't really use. They kind of just hang there, and then even as he moves, he kind of pulls himself along by his front legs. He doesn't lift himself up. He just literally pulls himself along by his belly, and his back legs and his tail just kind of flip around and move around and stuff like that. So unfortunately, he doesn't move the best. So he is still 100% okay. It doesn't hurt him or anything like that. He can eat, and he does all this other stuff. He can take a bath. I do put him outside, give him natural sunlight, and he does move around in the pen and everything like that. He can get to the shade. No problem. It's just he would not survive in the wild. And I didn't really feel confident keeping him on a loose substrate or anything like that, because I don't know. It's easier to keep him on newspaper with his kind of special needs, and he doesn't mind at all. So he's got 1 hide in the back. I used to do a hide underneath this thing, but he couldn't really get up onto this thing, and so if he ever wants to sleep, he either sleeps on the rock or he goes and sleeps in that little cave thing. So again, when you say bearded dragons and reptile care, generally you do want to try and give him 2 different hides to sleep in, but he doesn't really mind, and he is kind of a special needs case. He has a lower water bowl that he can get into, and he is in a 40-gallon tank, and since he can't climb or jump, I just kind of keep it open, and I have this, what is this, it's a 15-gallon tank lid that's just flipped upside down, so I can just kind of slide it, and I can reach in and grab him. It's very handy. Could not get away with that with my other bearded dragons. And you can see when he sits in my hand, there's the tail. It kind of wiggles around a little bit, and it kind of just sits up like this. It doesn't really just sit flat, and his back legs just kind of hang off at weird angles, and he usually just pulls himself along by his front ones. Now, he's a very pretty bearded dragon. He's got this very bright orange beard. I keep him in this kind of easy to clean, change out the newspaper substrate, and I mean, again, he doesn't mind. Really, for the most part, the lizards don't mind. As long as their temperature, their diet, and everything is correct, then you're good to go. So, and I do put them outside, get them some natural sunlight. The tortoises and the bearded dragons, when I put them outside, I don't leave them out there because they are small, and I mean, most of the animals around here probably would try and snack on them, like foxes and raccoons and stuff at night. During the day, it's really not a problem. So I put them out during the day, and then once it starts getting dark out, I bring them inside. So it's a little bit of a work carting 7 tortoises, 2 iguanas, 3 bearded dragons in and out. But I mean, get them natural sunlight, it's kind of worth it to me. So now we're going to move next to him, where I have another one of my kind of favorite animals that I have, but this animal doesn't really go to programs at all. Right here I have Delilah, my frilled dragon. I don't think I've shown her off yet on the channel. And she's an Indonesian frilled dragon. She's not Australian. I don't have the money for an Australian frilled dragon. And she is in a, 3 foot by 3 foot by like 18-inch enclosure. And this works really, really well for her. Now, normally these animals, she's very stressed. She does not go to programs. She gets stressed pretty quickly. Whenever I bring her to programs, she usually won't eat for a few days after that. And she's kind of small and skinny as it is. So I just didn't want to stress her out too much. Oh, she's shedding her tail right now. So I do keep her on a bioactive substrate. So this has got leaf litter, you got moss in there, you've got different little pieces of cork bark and stuff. You got 2 live plants. These are recently replanted because their old plants were getting a little too big. I replanted these about a month ago. So this one's doing pretty good. You got some new growth right there. This one, a little bit of it's dying off, but you got some new growth as well. So they both seem to be doing pretty good. Normally live plants do really well in Delilah's enclosure. And because this is an animal I don't really need to get out very often. This is one I can kind of dress up and make a little bit prettier with live plants and bioactive substrate and everything. Because those two big plants, they were pretty big. So I moved them over to the bigger enclosure to give the plants more space. But it would have been perfectly fine if this kind of becomes very jungly, because I don't need to get her out very often. And they're famous, obviously. They have this frill. Ooh, see? She's not really used to being handled a whole lot. I don't usually mess with her much, so she's just looking at me because she's just like, are you feeding me or what's going on? So, but yeah, so she's got this big piece of cork bark to hide onto. Now with frilled dragons, you can actually even make it more of a vertical incline. The frilled dragons will hide onto that. For her, I just kind of gave her a slight angle. This whole thing with the logs and everything came in with Levi, my green iguana, which kind of gives you an idea of the bad care he went through, because Levi was kept in this enclosure when he was still like 2.5 feet long. So this was too small for him even back then. It's a much better size for a frilled dragon. Now frilled dragons, the Australians get bigger than the Indonesians, and the males actually get bigger than the females. So of the 4 different possible frilled dragons you can get, male, female, Indonesian, and Australian, she's an Indonesian female. So she is the smallest kind of possible frilled dragon for the most part. Most part, she's up here. Sometimes she'll kind of slink back here, especially if a volunteer comes down and she's scared of him. She'll kind of slink onto the other side of this. Sometimes she'll hide behind this bush back here. So she's got a lot of, this is an enclosure I'm very happy with. I love giving live plants and bioactive substrate when I can. So this is Delilah. Doesn't go to programs, but still, frilled dragons are awesome. Now we're going to move on to that wall. We're going to talk about our last animals for the video. Right here we have the only snake we're going to talk about today. This is Olive, my brown water python. Now she is, if you'll notice, the enclosure looks kind of dark. So there is an LED strip up there across the back. I got these PVC enclosures in 2 years ago. I got this one, and then I got what's called the snake wall. That is not going to be featured today, but I basically have an 8x8 wall of PVC snake enclosures. And ever since I got the enclosures themselves are really nice, but the LED lighting has been crap, because probably about 6 months after I got this set of enclosures, because this is kind of like an island, it goes around, they're all back to back, but ever since I got these ones, the LED lights basically kaput on me 6 months later. And I'm not really an electrician, and it doesn't really matter with the snakes and like the lizards that are on either side of this. I can just install in other lights, so whatever. She gets light because there's a window right here, so she does get a day-night cycle. It's just the enclosure itself is not super lit up, which again doesn't make for great YouTube videos. Sorry about that, but it works well for the snake. Now she's got a couple logs in here to climb on. She's got a water bowl right here. She's got 2 hides, and then this one I think is where she is right now. Let me see. Oh, she's in shed right now. This is why you check your animals before you start filming. So she's in shed, so I'm gonna like quickly take her up. I'm not gonna like move her around too much. Come here, you. So this is Olive. She is my brown water python. They're a very cool animal. She's going to get a lot bigger than this. She's in shed right now. Normally these snakes are very kind of reflective of the light, so she looks like a moving rainbow. And she's going to get an upgrade next year, because right now this enclosure works fine for her. Let me fix this right now for her. So this is going to, whoop, there you go. This is 3 foot by 2 foot. I believe this is 2 foot. So this is a pretty big enclosure for her. It holds humidity really well, so she's never had a bad shed for me really. And they are just a very gorgeous snake, very uncommon snake. And like I said, it's going to be the only snake we're talking about today, because most of my snakes are over on the snake wall. And I'm going to save that for the full-on reptile room tour. She's one of my only ones over here. So now why don't we move down the row to Big Lou. This is my Indonesian blue-tongued skink. He is also one of the most popular reptiles I have for my programs, because they're just, I don't know, it's kind of like a minier sausagey or tegu in a way, because they're very friendly if you kind of socialize them right. I have met a couple kind of huffy blue-tongued skinks, but he's a very friendly dude. He's a little skittish when I first go to get him out, but as soon as he's up in my hands, he's usually good for the most part. They're very friendly, they're very personable, they can kind of socialize really well. You got that cute big blue tongue, and he wants to go back down. All right, in you go. I'm probably going to get hate for a couple things in the comments, honestly, with the loose substrate and all the other stuff. But this guy, so blue-tongued skinks are one of the lizards out there that people say you don't need UV rays for it. So I do not have UV light for my blue-tongued skink. I know, blasphemy, whatever. But I've had him in here for 2 years now, and I've taken him to the vet to get x-rays, and his bone density, everything is perfect. So you do not, in my opinion, you do not necessarily need to give your blue-tongued skink UV. I do want to give him it someday. It's just, it's kind of hard to mount one in here. So I'm going to probably upgrade him eventually, probably next summer. He's going to get, because right now he's in a 3x2, so I do want to upgrade him to a 4x2. So what I'll probably do is be the heat lamp down here, and then I'll have a UV light kind of mounted in here on this side. So, oh, Are you in here right now? Yeah. There he goes. That's one of his 2 hides. He's got this cork thing, and then he's got an actual reptile cave. And it's very cute. He'll just kind of slide right in through because it's at an angle. So he's going to try and back out right now. But it's at an angle right here. So he'll just kind of like, he'll sleep in it a lot. This is it. He'll actually usually sleep in this one. See, he's already going back into it. And he does have 2 live plants, so I broke off pieces from what is in Delilah's enclosure, so the same 2 plants. And the Indonesians, they do like it a little bit higher humidity than the Australian blue tongues do, and they don't get quite as big as the Australian blue tongues. He's got a water bin right here that he can kind of get into. It's pretty low, and it's kind of big for him. And he's got a lot of leaf litter. We've got some isopods and springtails in here. I think we've even got a couple millipedes. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of springtails right there. But yeah, so that's Big Lou. Again, no UV light, so feel free to lambast me in the comments if you want. But 2 years, bone density is perfect. As long as everything else, your calcium, your multivitamin, your supplementation, your diet, as long as everything else is good, there are plenty of breeders that keep their blue tongues without UV light. So again, there are plenty of people that do it, and there are people that don't do it. So it's not like a monitor lizard or an iguana. Obviously, those have the UV light. But this guy, it's just a choice that I made, and he's doing okay. So now we're going to go on the other wall, and we're going to look at a lizard that you have seen in the enclosure before. We're going to talk about Rufus, my legless lizard, kind of close cousin of the skink. How fortuitous he's hanging out right here. Come here, you. Now, they can get much, much bigger than this. Hi. And sometimes he's a little huffy with the handling. So this is his enclosure. He's in a 40-gallon front opening breeder tank, essentially. He's got about a good 4 to 5 inches of substrate depth for him to dig into because this subspecies likes to dig a lot. This is another enclosure that I'm pretty happy with. Now, this is a pretty good mix because he can obviously be very hard to find. So I would love to give him even more substrate. Oh, stop. You scare yourself sometimes. I'm just going to put him back. But for the most part, he's usually in his hide. And he actually, just like Lou, he has a little cork rind right here. Sometimes he's in there, and then most of the time he's under his water bowl. So normally if I just lift a water bowl, I find him really, really quickly. Now, I did used to have some live plants in there with him, but he would just dig into the roots and dig them up and kill them. So, again, he's another one, kind of like the monitor lizard, I haven't had success with. Maybe I need to get sturdier live plants for him, but he's in a kind of semi-arid setup, and then I will dump some water into the substrate here every once in a while, just kind of help up the humidity, especially down in his burrows, helps with shedding. He just shed literally 4 days ago, so he's looking nice and pretty right now. So what's going to happen is when Olive gets her upgrade, he's actually going to move into this 3x2 right here, so he'll get a little bit extra space. And he has a UV light right here. He has a strip UV light, and then he's also got his heat lamp right over there. They're not too much of a basking lizard. I will see him out sometimes on the hot side, but most of the time he's kind of either low to the ground, in his substrate, something like that. So, and he's a little food bowl right here. He's got some real logs and rocks and stuff in there. And then again, soil, substrate, little bit of eco earth mix for the substrate. So works really, really well for him. Hi, are you gonna come out and see me? No. Yes? Are you coming? Hello. It's feeding day for the lizard. As soon as I'm done filming, I'm gonna be feeding him, so he knows he knows normally when this is open, it's either, and I'm not taking him out right away, he knows it's usually feeding time. So he's kind of going over to the food bowl. He's like, so when we doing this? We doing this? 2 more enclosures I think I'm gonna show you guys. The other one is directly below him. And right here, we have Charlie in my very first wooden enclosure. So this is the first one we ever built, and this one has been here for quite a while now. Come here, Charlie. Charlie is my red tegu, and he's a bit brattier compared to Norman. Oh, and you're going into shed right now, it looks like. Come here. There we go. Come here, big boy. But yeah, so Charlie is my red tegu. When I got Charlie, he was very small. When I got Norman in, Norman was already a pretty good size, but Charlie I got in, I think Charlie was only like a half a pound or so. So he was much, much smaller, and now he's right around 14 pounds. So he's a pretty big boy. I replanted this bush over here from Delilah, and then I put this snake plant in there, and it doesn't seem to be doing that hot. So I think because there is some cleanup crew. He's got some mealworm beetles and things like that in here, and I think they were chewing on the snake plant a little bit. But yeah, so he doesn't really go to programs. For the most part, he kind of just hangs out with me. He's fine with people for the most part. It's just the travel. He does not seem to really like being put in a travel bin and brought to places. So yeah, he's another one where he's got a substrate mix of like eco earth with topsoil, play sand. He's also got a lot of cypress mulch mixed in as well, so it holds the humidity really, really well. He's got his basking rock, which is just a rock from a garden section at Home Depot. He's got a log in here. He's got some other rocks and things, and then For his cave on the other end, it's just half of a drainage pipe, and that's actually what Norman used to sleep in, but Norman just got too big for it, and Charlie sleeps in it, so it works out really, really well for him. The tegus I do kind of take upstairs and kind of let them stretch their legs, walk around the house, to give them a bath, and then in the fall when I get a whole bunch of leaves in the yard, I usually do throw leaf litter in here for him, and that just kind of naturally breaks down as the cleanup crew kind of eats its way through it, but it does give a nice, really big boost to humidity, especially when you missed it. This is the first one we ever built, and we just used these plain white Drylock, which I really regret doing. As you saw with the other ones, I usually use like a light green, so it usually just looks better than the white walls where you have all this dirt and stuff build up on it and everything, so but yeah, so that's Charlie. He's my red tegu. He's brattier than Norman, and I don't think I've actually shown him off in a video yet, at least that I can think of, but there you go. Kind of your first look at Charlie, and he's probably going to go back to bed soon as I close this, realizing I'm not feeding him today. That's tomorrow. And now for the last enclosure I'm going to show you folks today. This is Levi, my green iguana. You've seen him in a lot of videos. We just had our green iguana spotlight, and he's been in some other ones, and walked him on his leash and things like that. He's another one of my most popular education animals, and besides Norman, he's the other big lizard that usually goes to programs the most. We built this. This is a 6 foot by 5 foot by 4 foot deep wooden enclosure. And there are a couple problems with this one. One of them is it's rotting. It's because we made it bigger, because when you get wood, they're 4 by 8 sheets, so we technically made it bigger, so we had to kind of adjoin 2 pieces, and it didn't quite hold up. So around the bottom edge, we didn't seal it properly with the caulk or something, so it's starting to kind of erode and warp down, and there's some dirt that's starting to leak out. And then over here on this side of the basking log, his nails have really torn right through that. So this whole thing is unfortunately becoming unusable because the bottom is starting to rot out. So in December, like I said, we're getting a new 4x8 that's going on top of Roxy for one animal, and then the new one is going to be a vertical PVC enclosure for Levi. And Levi actually shares his home with Rosie, my redfoot tortoise. Rosie and Levi live together. I am sure I'm going to get a lot of flack for this in the comments, people yelling at me for cohabbing a dangerous, mean green iguana with a tortoise, but little side fact, they've been living together for 2.5 years now. Time is not anything. You can have tegus that live together for 10 years and all of a sudden one will turn and kill the other one. So that can happen. But Levi here, his previous owner did not take good care of him. His previous owner fed him, because when I got Levi, he was 6 years old. He was 1.5 pounds. Mind you, a 6-year-old iguana should be 15 plus pounds and 6 feet long by then. But when I got him, he was much, much smaller because his previous owner just fed him iceberg lettuce for his whole life, basically. Never gave him anything else. And iceberg lettuce is basically just water. It's not even really that good for us. And now he weighs about 5.5 pounds, so he is slowly going up in size. But again, green iguanas are usually, they just explode with growth. So he's very, very small compared to what he should be. And he's very, very friendly. So I've had no reservations about keeping them together. And I put his food, his salad bowl goes right here. Rosie's salad bowl goes right down there. There are animals that cohab in the wild. These guys are from the same area. And if you are getting your first redfoot tortoise, obviously don't cohab or anything like that. But I've been doing this for a few years. I trust my animals, so that's what I do. I mean, if you go on Camp Kennan, he's got a crocodile monitor in with tortoises, and that's an animal that's actually a predator, and there's been no problem. So plenty of people can do it. It's just you have to kind of know what you're doing and everything like that. It's not something I would recommend. It's just something I do. So anyways, back to the actual enclosure itself. It's got these fun opening doors right here. They're squeaky. This tree used to be much, much taller. Levi jumped to it and snapped the whole thing 2 months ago. So I think it's just kind of dying off right here. I don't know. We'll see. There is some new growth down here. Big lizards, sometimes live plants don't work out well. But yeah, so we custom made this log. We screwed in the logs in place. And then right there is Rosie's UV light. We built like a custom frame for it. And we put the log on top of it. And we screwed that all into place. So he has something to sit on. She has her ability to get UV. And then over here, we kind of took some straight logs, screwed them together, made like a little kind of stand for him. And then we put a lip right here so that his food bowl, he can't just push it off and knock it off, because then she would get all of his salad because she would not give him a chance to eat it. Rosie's previous owner also was not feeding her enough. Rosie was an 11-year-old redfoot tortoise, and she weighed 2 pounds. Now she weighs 6.5 after a couple of years. I've had her for a couple of years too. She was actually one of my first. She was one of my original 8 animals that I had for programs. Oh, are you going down, dude? Most times she's actually falling asleep in the water bowl. And when we give them an upgrade, when they get their upgrade in December, we're going to be giving them a bigger water area as well. You want to come up and see me? Hi. Yeah, he's a very friendly, very handsome iguana. But yeah, so that was the last enclosure I'm going to show you guys today. Thank you so much. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, please feel free to like and subscribe if you watched all the way through and you're curious about all of the other animals I have. Because remember, when we hit 1,000 subs, we're going to be doing a full reptile room tour. So that's going to be the invertebrates, my tarantulas, my scorpions, my bugs. That's going to be all of my other lizards, all of the snakes, because we only covered one snake today. Thanks for sticking around. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And again, it's not as pretty as some of your other like reptile YouTubers, like Serpent Design does some really gorgeous enclosures and stuff. These are education animals, so I can't turn this into a rainforest because I need to be able to get him out without him ripping all the plants out. So I try my best. Hopefully that kind of shines through that I do try my best with a lot of these animals. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe. Check out our Patreon. Link is in below if you want to support the channel. Get different perks like early access to seeing what those new animals are. I'll be showing those on Patreon before I'll show them on YouTube or Facebook or anything. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you later.